shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Behave yourselves!
Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia of the movies. So yesterday I went to see Oppenheimer on an IMAX screen. This is Christopher Nolan's newest film, and based on, of course, Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb as he was known. I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. Cillian Murphy, I have to say right off the bat, is the equivalent of 1,000 burning suns. I mean, it is a nuclear performance. I just have never seen anyone give a performance of such nuance like this. Not on this scale. This is a Titanic production. It's 3 hours long. And as much as I admire the film, I think it's a very good film. And you know, let's be clear. There have been criticisms, of course, political criticisms more than anything else. The film is strictly about Oppie, as he was nicknamed, Oppenheimer, the Manhattan Project, the building of the first atomic bomb, the rush to get this done under Dwight D. Eisenhower, who helped to finance this particular project that they did out in Los Alamos, New Mexico, helping to make this atomic bomb ready for war, which is really the point of doing it in the first place. The film also deals with the fact that they wanted to do this in a rush because they wanted to drop one on Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, of course, surrendered, and then it was decided to drop it on two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Seeing the development of this is fascinating. It's riveting stuff. The understanding the math behind it, not that I did, but just the explanation of it, the quantum mechanics, all these different scientists that were brought in to Los Alamos in the middle of the desert to figure this out. How are we going to do this? And it isn't so much about the ethics of the bomb, they're just making the bomb. And that is extremely well done, not to mention these metaphoric shots of raindrops that fall on lakes, or sometimes on the on window panes, usually, of course, from Oppie's point of view. And as a framework for the structure of the picture, narrative structure, the movie does flash forward a lot to these AEC, or Atomic Energy Commission, hearings, of which they were trying to basically take away Oppenheimer's security clearance, his government security clearance. And this it did ruin his career. Here was the father of the atomic bomb. He meets with Truman after they have just bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As history tells us, he wasn't completely against the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima, but he was against the use of it in Nagasaki. And then afterwards had no interest in nuclear proliferation. And he met with President Truman, who in this film is played by Gary Oldman. Stunning performance, by the way. It's just a cameo, but man, I just didn't even... He did it extremely well. Gary Oldman is like a chameleon of an actor, you know. Gary Oldman, back in the 20, 30 years ago, could have played Oppenheimer. I mean, I firmly believe that. But anyway, so he's telling Oppenheimer, sort of congratulating him for being the father of the atomic bomb, and Oppenheimer has other views. He says he's not going to continue working on any bomb, particularly the H-bomb or hydrogen bomb, that he wanted to dismantle the Los Alamos Manhattan Project altogether and leave the land to the Indians, as he says. I thought that was really something to hear that line. And Truman sort of just is disgusted by this guy, not seen as a patriot, and tells him, get that crybaby out of here. I think he used harsher language in real life. So the film deals with all that stuff. But I gotta say, the AEC hearings and these Senate hearings about the antagonistic AEC chairman, Louis Strauss. Very, very well played by Robert Downey Jr. It occupies so much time in the film, particularly in the last hour of the picture. I just wasn't really invested in this stuff. I mean, some of it is very well done. I mean, I'm not denying that, but I felt it took away from the character of Oppenheimer. And so throughout the film, you almost feel like his world is, there's friction. There's almost nuclear fission on the screen in a way. Something piercing about the film's way of editing back and forth the way it does. But also the soundtrack. Then the idea of how this nuclear fission works. It's sort of, there's that development that cuts away frequently. At least in the beginning of the film. But even towards the end, you feel like his world is coming apart and that it's about to detonate in a way just like a nuclear bomb. And he doesn't detonate. That's the most interesting thing about the film, and what makes it a very good film, is that Oppenheimer is depicted as the kind of guy who restrains his emotions and his feelings. There's you never feel like he is going to unleash, any sort of fury, that he's going to get mad at anybody or do anything. And his wife, Catherine Kitty Poneg, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, played by Emily Blunt in a very good performance, who's pretty much a alcoholic and yells at him all the time. How come you don't fight back? Because he doesn't fight back against the judges and everyone else at the AEC hearings. And it goes on and on and on, and you feel almost frustrated by this man for not doing what, he should have done. And that he, in a sense, Kitty tells him, you allow them to tar and feather you, and you think that's going to get you off the hook, in a way. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Because of not just the invention of the atomic bomb, but that thinking that dropping on Hiroshima, in his view, and the government's and Truman, was the way to go. They had to do it to show the destructive nature of it, and therefore Japan would surrender. Even though history shows us that Japan was probably willing to surrender prior to the dropping of this bomb. Keep in mind, Nazi Germany had already surrendered. So there are all sorts of views and interpretations about that. Now, my issue with the film is different than maybe some other people, perhaps. It's not a major issue, but it prevents the film from being a really great film. It's a very good film, a near great film, but not a really great film. But it will be remembered for years to come, for sure. I think Oppenheimer will always be remembered. In particular, because Cillian Murphy sort of informs the film's narrative from the start. It is about him. And we'll get back to that in a second, because this has been criticized as well. But my issue are the two women that are shown in this film. Emily Blunt as Kitty. I just felt that the movie kind of, Nolan has this ability, and he does it very well, of flashing in and out of, certain characters, introducing one line, then someone else has a similar line later on. It's kind of like, it's just, or completes the sentence, so to speak. And he does that a lot in this film. But he cuts away too much from Kitty. There's one scene where, I think it's sort of at the start of the picture, where Oppenheimer, it's focused on him as he is being interrogated during this hearing. And you have a out-of-focus shot in the background of Emily Blunt. And she's just seated there. And occasionally she may look up or anything, but it doesn't focus on her for a long time. Then there is the revelation of this affair, and this is the second woman in Oppenheimer's life. The name being Jean Tetlik, who was a communist. In fact, he knew a lot of communists, and even he himself was something of a communist. Emily Blunt was an ex-communist, her character, Kitty. So there's a lot of that in the picture. And there's a scene where he reveals that he continued having an affair with this woman who he started having an affair with prior to meeting Kitty, and then while being married to Kitty, and Gene Tatlick, played by Florence Pugh. And there's a moment where they're seemingly having sex on at the hearing, which is just imagined in his mind, and then you recognize that maybe Emily Blunt is imagining this because she's looking straight at what may be Oppenheimer's, the back of his head, but he's looking at this woman, Jean, who's looking at her. It's really extraordinary stuff. I mean, it's one of the most unusual sex scenes I've ever seen since Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. I mean, it's just insane. But her character, again, she's there and she exists, in the periphery, but she's not given a whole lot of leverage, and this was an important woman because he cries about her passing because she commits suicide, which she did in real life, of course. Most of this is based pretty much on a book by called American Prometheus. So, and then there are other issues in the film that are not given enough oomph, I thought, and detract. So if you're going to have the hearings, at least focus on the people who they're talking about in his life, these team of scientists. Now, the film reveals, I think, 1 or 2 spies in the picture. One guy named Carl. There may have been another spy. Apparently, there were actually 4 spies at the Los Alamos Manhattan Project site who revealed the secrets of the design of this atomic bomb and everything else to the Soviets, who were technically our allies at that time during World War II. But there isn't enough, and then there are a couple of them who are disloyal to Oppenheimer, and they show that during the hearings, but I felt like they were sort of, there, but not enough leverage given. And I thought, to me, it just seemed like we learned more about Lewis Strauss, this antagonistic guy, who was the head of the chairman of the AEC, Atomic Energy Commission, played by Robert Downey Jr. We know more about him than we do about the 2 women in his life, or a couple of his associates. And for a 3-hour film, you could certainly find a way to inject that much more into it. And I would have perhaps left out a lot of Oppenheimer's background from the past before he made it to Los Alamos. I would have gone straight to Los Alamos, the Manhattan Project, deal with that situation, and you could still use this framework of the hearings as a flashback structure, in a way, going back and forth, back and forth. And Nolan is one of the best to do that, for sure. Because, to me, his greatest film is still Memento from back in the day. But he also did another great film prior to that called Following, which is one of the most astonishing debuts by any film director in history. That was an amazing film. So, getting back to Oppenheimer. Now, other criticisms have come about, 2 of them in particular, with regards to how come they don't show the bombing of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, I don't feel that was absolutely necessary for this film, and I'll tell you why. This is the story of a man who shows some sorrow, some regret about developing the atomic bomb. And mainly because of how it's being used. He knew it was going to be used in war. There was no question about it. He sort of encouraged it, in a way. Even though the government and the military didn't need any encouraging to try to end this war, which is really what this film tries to show. They wanted to end the war, end this for good. Japan was the last motivating factor in this. If they showed the bombing of the cities, it might have helped the film. It's hard to say if that would have helped to build the impact. Because the film, you see, it's not really a pro-nuclear film, and it's not anti-nuclear. It's sort of just, and the movie doesn't really praise him, doesn't hold him up with any reverence, doesn't present him as a saint. He's just a guy who hasn't really, he knows he has blood on his hands. And that to me was enough to show he was against this. Also, there's a scene in the film which I thought made up for the fact that they didn't really show the bombings. In an interesting way. It was much more subtle, but very well done. When he is, on the evening of the Hiroshima bombing, he meets with all these team of scientists and everyone else inside of this auditorium, a small auditorium, or not quite an auditorium, I don't know what it was, but there were bleachers. So we'll say an auditorium to some degree. And you hear the feet thumping on the bleachers, which you hear the sound throughout the picture, here and there. And he is there and he says, well, we did it. We got him. And they all applaud and, And I don't remember if in the film he says, Nazi Germany, I wish we could have used it on them, but we didn't. Which apparently he did say that in real life. And so as he's talking about this, the screen suddenly fills with white light. Just like you would get from the detonation of a nuclear bomb as it hits the ground. And then he sees the skin on a couple of women flayed, and sort of. And then at another point, as he's walking out, he steps on what looks like a charred corpse. And this reminded me of a fascinating documentary, which the title doesn't occur to me right now, about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in this documentary, this girl, this Japanese girl who survived the deadly attack, I think she was burned in the skin a little or a lot. At any rate, the point is, she was looking for her mother, and there were all of these charred corpses everywhere. Just nothing there. No human flesh. And she recognized her mother because she saw the gold tooth was still there. The rest of it was just gone. All black. Just charred. The wind came in and swept her away. All the ashes. They were all ashes. All that was left was the gold tooth. It's a powerful image. And that's what it reminded me of in this film. That took me to that image. So I think that the film is not really letting him off the hook at all. And so based on that, I could say I'm not really sure it was necessary to show those attacks. Now, the Trinity test, which was the first detonation of an atomic bomb, when you see it, it's interesting because it doesn't seem that awesome. You see all this fire, and you hear nothing, and then suddenly, it's the impact then is really felt. So you almost sense that the people at Los Alamos that were watching this, as they put their glasses to protect, from the first light, that they're not, like, are they really impressed or not? They're not really sure until they really feel the impact tremor. And that's what really did it. So it almost like Nolan, in a way, is sort of cutting back from the reality of the atomic bomb, which I thought was odd. He doesn't really dwell on that very much. And so in that sense, he doesn't dwell at all with what happened. These cities being burned and with nothing left are mostly mentioned, sometimes in a very cursory manner. So there's that. Then, apparently the other criticism is that the film doesn't deal with, which again I don't see what would have been the point, but it would have been an interesting addition nonetheless. I'll give you that much for the critics. There were some that felt that they could have explored how the indigenous peoples in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and in other tests, some of them weren't warned about the effects of this nuclear bomb. Many of them got cancer and died as a result later on, and so on and so forth. And radiation being the main thing, which is not mentioned in this film at all. You get more mention of radiation in the China Syndrome than you ever do in all 3 hours of Oppenheimer. It's very interesting. But I don't know if that would have been absolutely essential. Again, I think I would have had less of the hearings overall, less of Lewis Strauss, more of Oppenheimer's thoughts about this, all this, and more focus on these two women. And then deal with, in some way, perhaps, glean more insight into the power and destruction of this bomb. So, a very good film, but not necessarily a great one. But most definitely worth seeing. I mean, I think I would certainly see this again, no question. I don't think the film is as powerful as a film I reviewed a few months back on my blog, The Day After Trinity, which is a 1980-81 documentary on Oppenheimer. I highly recommend you check that out. That is an amazing film. I believe they have it in the Internet Archive. Do check that out, please. Day After Trinity. If you've seen Oppenheimer or you're about to see it, see that documentary first. It will give you a reason for going to see Oppenheimer, which I recommend seeing on an IMAX screen. Absolutely. So those are my thoughts. I don't know. What are your thoughts out there about Oppenheimer? Have you seen it? What do you think? Do you think we should have seen the bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Just your overall thoughts, or your thoughts about even Oppenheimer himself. This guy, I mean, he's been the subject of movies and television for quite some time. And but this one will be long remembered. I don't know if this film is going to do that well at the Oscars. I think Cillian Murphy is certainly a sure spot for Best Actor nomination at the very least. So, great cast. I didn't even mention Matt Damon is in this movie. There's just a whole bunch of people. So I'll leave it at that. But definitely do check this out, Oppenheimer. Let me your thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification for more uploads in the future. And that's all I got to say about that. And this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.